troponin and cardiac events in stable ischemic heart disease and diabetes. Cardiac troponin concentration is the preferred marker of myocardial necrosis. Elevated concentrations of cardiac troponin have a strong association with an adverse prognosis in patients with acute coronary syndromes and are used to identify patients who are likely to benefit from an early invasive management strategy. High sensitivity assays that allow the measurement of very low cardiac troponin levels in patients with stable heart disease are now available for clinical and research use. These low, previously undetectable troponin concentrations have shown strong associations with myocardial infarction, stroke, and death in a variety of primary and secondary prevention populations, including in patients with stable ischemic heart disease. We hypothesized that a high-sensitivity cardiac troponin assay might be used to identify a subgroup of patients with both stable ischemic heart disease and diabetes who are at high risk of cardiac events, and, furthermore, might predict who would benefit from prompt coronary revascularization. We also hypothesized that coronary revascularization will lower subsequent measurements of circulation troponin concentrations. To test this hypothesis, we use a high-sensitivity assay to measure cardiac troponin T concentrations at baseline and at the one-year follow-up in 2368 patients with both type 2 diabetics and stable ischemic heart disease who underwent randomization of either prompt coronary revascularization plus intensive medical therapy or intensive medical therapy alone in the bypass angioplastic revascularization investigation in type 2 diabetes, BARI-2D trial. In this study involving patients with both type 2 diabetes and stable ischemic heart disease, baseline cardiac troponin T concentrations above the upper limit of normal were associated with approximately a doubling of the risk of myocardial infarction. Nearly 40% of the patients in our study had a high sensitivity cardiac troponin T concentration at baseline that was above the upper reference limit used to define myocardial injury. Despite aggressive medical therapy for type 2 diabetics and stable ischemic heart disease, the median troponin T concentration increased over 1 year of follow-up, and no significant reductions in troponin T concentrations were observed in patients who underwent coronary revascularization. Finally, the patients in the BARI-2D trial who had an increase of more than 25% in troponin T concentration from baseline to the 1 year follow-up had a worse outcome than those who had a stable or decreasing troponin T concentration. The strength of the relationship between troponin T concentration and the subsequent risk of myocardial infarction, stroke, heart failure, death from cardiovascular causes, and death from any cause suggested that high sensitivity cardiac troponin T concentration is a powerful prognostic marker in patients who have both type 2 diabetics and a stable ischemic heart disease.
Power enters your digestive system. and is broken down to simple sugars like glucose. Glucose enters the bloodstream, causing an increase in blood glucose levels. But various mechanisms bring blood glucose back down to its normal level, the set point. This is an example of homeostasis, the body's tendency to maintain relatively constant internal conditions. Hormones produced by the pancreas regulate blood glucose levels. Let's zoom in. When blood glucose levels are high, glucose molecules leave the blood and enter beta cells in the pancreas. The beta cells respond by releasing the hormone insulin. Insulin enters the bloodstream and is transported to cells all over the body. Let's see what happens in the liver. Insulin binds to receptors on liver cells. This causes the cells to take in more glucose. Inside the liver cells, glucose is converted to glycogen, a storage molecule. Blood glucose levels decrease as glucose is taken up by liver cells and other body cells. As a result, less and less insulin is released by the pancreas, and blood glucose levels stabilize at their set point. This is an example of how negative feedback maintains homeostasis. What happens if you skipped lunch and your blood glucose levels are low? Let's zoom into the pancreas again. When blood glucose levels are low, alpha cells in the pancreas release the hormone glucagon. Glucagon enters the bloodstream and acts on target cells in the liver. Glucagon binds to receptors on the liver cells, signaling the liver cells to break glycogen down to glucose. Glucose is released. And blood glucose levels increase. As a result, less glucagon is released by the pancreas, and blood glucose levels stabilize at their set point. In this way, two hormones with opposing effects allow the body to maintain homeostasis of blood glucose levels.